What does it take to create an unforgettable VR experience? Join me, Eloise Singer, the director and producer of the Emmy-nominated VR game The Pirate Queen with Lucy Liu, as we delve behind the scenes and share with you how we brought the legendary pirate Cheng Shih's story to life. In each episode, I'll sit down with the brilliant minds behind the Pirate Queen. From writers to designers, actors to programmers, we'll uncover their creative processes and the challenges that they overcame to create a VR experience like no other.
So Eloise,
Lucy.
this is a huge project that you've been working on for how many years now?
For nearly 6 years, 5 years.
So you've been working on this project for 5 to 6 years. And how does it feel having it out in the world now?
Exciting and rewarding. I think for our team, they've worked so hard on this and everyone has brought it to life. And it feels like collectively we've put so much effort and love into it. So to see people enjoying it and to step into the world for the first time and just see these huge smiles on people's faces when they play the game is kind of amazing.
Now, when the Pirate Queen came to me, I had never heard of Cheng Shih. And I was so surprised to hear about this woman who was so powerful, the most powerful pirate queen in history. So most people don't know about her. So how did she come to you and how did you find out about Cheng Shih?
So I found out about her because a friend of mine told me and literally said, did you know that the most powerful pirate in history was a woman? And I was like, no, I don't think that's true. And she was like, no, genuinely, it was a woman from 19th century China who married the leader of a fleet. And when he mysteriously died, she took over and commanded about 70,000 people during the lead up to the Opium Wars and became the most powerful pirate of all time. And I was like, this is incredible. How does no one know about this? And so I started looking into it and researching it. And the more I learned, the more I was like, the story has to be told. Not only did she become the most powerful pirate of all time, but she paved the way for gender equality. She literally created a code of laws that meant that men and women had to be treated equally on her ship. And so the more I realized that no one knew the story, the more I realized that it had to be told. But again, had you heard about it before we started the project?
I had never heard about Cheng Shih, and I didn't really know that female pirates existed. I know that people have sort of pushed female forward films for young girls, and obviously Charlie's Angels was a really big moment in time for a lot of young girls to see 3 women coming together. But for this to be something based in reality was shocking, and that she pushed gender equality is also amazing, especially in that time in the 1800s, when it was astounding that she started as a courtesan and then worked her way up to become a powerful woman and not having any education and having that background of knowing about finance, about what it was to be the leader of 70,000 sailors and pirates. And can you tell me a little bit about how she approached the Chinese government back then, because they knew they were in a great deal of turmoil, and how she ended up winning that war between them?
I think it's interesting because when she became leader of the fleet, she then took on different imperial forces and the Qing dynasty as well. And so to be able to rule the South China Sea, she had to fight different opponents, and one of them was the Qing forces. And there was a big battle at the end where effectively she went to the governor and proposed this alliance that meant that she could retire from piracy, which at the time was phenomenal. I think anyone who retires as a pirate has literally won at being a pirate. Like, it's unreal. And so it was amazing. And then she started a gambling den in her late 60s and then just lived a long and happy life and then passed away in her sleep.
And playing the game is such a different experience because there's no combat involved. And normally VR has a lot of that kind of the war and the firing. And this is a very different game because it's about history and it's about learning. And so that's a really wonderful way for people to get involved because it's based on something historic. Is that something that you took into account when you decided to do this particular project, The Pirate Queen?
Yeah, definitely. And especially from the beginning, we wanted to make sure that we were making a game that wasn't going to be violent and didn't have combat elements to it, because ultimately we want to create something that kids can play and learn from. Because I always think that if I was growing up And I knew that the most powerful pirate in history was an Asian woman rather than a white man like Blackbeard. My perception of gender dynamics and gender roles would be very, very different. So I wanted something that was really accessible and that parents would feel really excited about when they were going to buy the game for their kids as well. And so I'm really pleased that we did it. And it is a creative risk, because ultimately a lot of VR games are known to be combat games. So going down the route of creating something that was more puzzle-based, that was exploratory, that meant that you could climb up the side of pirate ships, that you could row through waters, that you could navigate through moonlit cabins, I thought that was really exciting.
The production value is just incredible. It's immaculate in its detail, and it's almost like when you're playing the game, you feel like you can smell what that environment was on the ship. And I'm sure that that took a lot of research and time to work through it and understand it.
Yeah.
So how did your team research and understand that and try to get the details of that? Because obviously the player is moving in a in a space that's created by you.
Yeah.
So that's also almost terrifying to do something like that, as opposed to just having knowing where the camera is, because the person playing is the camera. So turning and moving and looking up and down, those are all things that you have to take into consideration, which creates a much bigger world for your team to have to manage.
100%. And especially from a storytelling point of view as well, it's so challenging because telling a story in VR is a bit like 3D chess. Like, you can't anticipate what the player's going to do because they can do anything. So when you're trying to tell a story, you have to anticipate every single thing that someone might do in that space, which is a huge challenge. But in terms of the historical side of things, we started working with researchers super early on into the project, and we brought on an amazing writer called Maya Bodenstein, who's half Chinese and half German, and she specializes in telling culturally accurate stories. So from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to work with Maya, and we've become really good friends in the process, which is amazing. And as a result, we brought on researchers, we brought on fact checkers, and we brought on sensitivity checkers as well, because we knew, being a UK-based company, that we wanted to tell this story in a way that would actually reflect China, because it is a Chinese story.
Well, thank you for bringing me on to this project, because I'd never heard of the Pirate Queen. And I was so surprised and excited to work with you. And when we were in the actual sound booth, you had a very specific tenor and timbre that you wanted her voice to be, and you knew exactly what you wanted as a director, which I love. And you had it, and then you would ask me to change it a little bit. And that was something for me that was different, because I've never done a voiceover for VR before. And after having played it, I really understood, whoa, I get what you're saying, and I understand, because it's quiet, it's in somebody's head. And that's very different from anything, because normally they want you to project, they want you to scream, and they want you to be part of it and draw the audience in. But in this way, the quieter you are, the more intimate it is for the player. So tell me about, as a director and working on this project for 5 to 6 years, how clear you were when you went and cast for this project.
There's no one that could do it better than you, literally. Like, when we first started, there was only one name. We were like, this has to be Lucy. You are the Pirate Queen. Like, it wouldn't make sense for it to be anyone else. So
I'm gonna add that to my resume.
Yeah.
I never thought that would be a Pirate Queen.
It's pretty cool.
A real life Pirate Queen that, based on somebody.
I mean, for you, how was it recording for VR? Because it is different, as you say, and I think for animation, a lot of the time you actually see visuals on screen, whereas for this, it was purely in your head. So how was it going through that experience?
I think for me, it was really giving up, what I thought it was supposed to be to you as a director, and to understand that it was going to be a much more intimate relationship with the player. So you're alongside somebody who's listening to you so close. And that was different for me. The funny thing about this particular project was the Cantonese, which I don't speak, I speak Mandarin, so it was very different. And to really understand that there's more tones than 4 in Cantonese, and really trying to use my ear to hear the exact pronunciation of the characters' names.
Yeah.
So that was fun, and also interesting. And having Andy Yu be the person to help us was wonderful. And he was very encouraging and he was just superb.
He's an amazing dialect coach. And I love the energy he brought into the room as well.
So the Pirate Queen franchise, what does it entail?
Yeah, I mean, it's so exciting. I think the fact that we are creating a game in VR and then we're expanding it into a franchise, it's the first time that this has ever happened. No one's ever created a game in VR before that then has built into a franchise. It's cool. It's pretty wild. But yeah, we're developing the graphic novel, we're developing a film, we're creating the podcast, The Pirate Queen as well. So I think that the Pirate Queen is secretly going to take over the world.
She's coming back from the 1800s.
Yes.
Do you feel like it's easier to have something when it's based on a real life person?
Yeah.
Or do you think it's more creative to have something that's completely out of the imagination?
I love the fact that it's based on a real person because she is incredible and she is forgotten from history. And so to bring that back to life and to inspire people to talk about it, and I think that's really special. That's so unique and bespoke. And obviously with the whole franchise, we're not just looking at Cheng Shih's story, we're looking at all of the different women from history who were effectively pirate queens like Grace O'Malley. And there are about 17 different women who were powerful pirate leaders in history that no one knows about. History is literally his story, which is in itself a fascinating thing. So I think like bringing to life women from history is really exciting and it feels really important as well.
Yeah. And I think that franchise is something that is empowering for young girls and for women, and also something that people don't know about.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful thing to bring forward. How did you know how you wanted to puzzle this game together in terms of how many different things that people would discover? The scroll, the keys. I know that you're dropping these little clues and hints in history, which is I thought was really interesting and wonderful. And was that part of your research?
It definitely was. We started out by making a short version of the game. And with that short version, we created the first room, which was an escape room. So when we were developing it, initially we developed this massive experience that was outside any of the realms of possibility. We literally had like huge battle sequences that were going to be epic that you would have to navigate through. We had a rope swing idea where you literally could climb onto a rope and then swing from one ship to another, which when we tested it, even our most experienced programmer who doesn't get motion sickness turned to us and said, I actually felt a little bit sick. And I looked at the video, I was like, I don't think I could ever do this in VR. This just looks like motion sickness to me. So it was one of those that it took a lot of iteration and a lot of just learning what was feasible, what was possible, what was fun.
Yeah.
And then in tandem developing that with the research side of things and making sure that everything fit the worlds that we were creating. So it was a process for sure. And sometimes when you get given parameters like time and budget, it means that you can develop actually a stronger game for it because you have to think outside the box because you're given a box.
It's kind of fun to play outside that parameter though and see, oh, we've gone too far.
Yeah.
You know, what I think what's wonderful about VR is when you actually do something and there's something to learn, you're not really thinking about the learning aspect. You're just doing it. And therefore you're learning. And I think that's one thing that I've learned about my son is to explain something as opposed to doing it. The action of it is so much more lasting.
100%.
And the power of that is wonderful because it stays with you. It becomes like a cellular experience.
Yeah.
I think that kind of learning is what's wonderful about this particular game.
Definitely. It's so interesting because so many people who have played it then say, oh, I went and read up about Cheng Shih and what her life was and what she went on to do, because obviously our game is the night that she came to power and there's so much more of her story. And that's the exciting thing about the franchise as well, is that this is just part one and there's so much more to uncover.
I think you did a fantastic job of being able to narrow it down to that one night that she comes into power because there's so much to explore. And what was wonderful about that time is for her is that because she was a courtesan, she did not have her feet bound. And, you know, that was something that was for people who were living in this very rich, powerful world. And for her, the power came from her feet not being bound. And for her to rise from poverty, essentially, and being a flower girl or prostitute at that time was really looked down upon. So she really came from a dark place to something that was quite significant at that time.
Most definitely. And the fact that she did become this incredibly powerful leader, it's such an phenomenal feat, especially just because the gender dynamics at that time were so impossible. I mean, women were literally subordinate to men. And so for her to achieve exactly what she did, having come from life of being a courtesan, it is really remarkable.
Also, her mind for financing, saying that she was going to take all the money, it was going to go into one place, and then she was going to allocate basically salary. It's very different for people that would just grab the money as a pirate and go, and that was it.
Yeah, she was so regimented in making sure that all of the finance was put into a pot. It's basically creating a banking system.
A banking system.
And then allocating it out. It's so forward-thinking, it's remarkable.
But I think the gender equality for men and women to be treated equally was really dynamic and forward-thinking for that time. And that if anyone abused a woman, they would be punished or they would be asked to get out. They were done.
They were done. They were
Walk
done.
the plank.
Walk the plank. It is interesting, though, that she was so forward-thinking, but also so ruthless. And I think that's the other thing as well, is that she was a complicated character. It wasn't just that she was kind and nice and serene and all of these things that we've seen on screen so often when women are depicted, and they're so one-dimensional. She was mean and ruthless.
No, that's not why you cast me. I am not ruthless.
You're the opposite of ruthless.
Oh my God, hilarious.
What's been the highlight for you of making the game?
I think the highlight was it was my first time doing VR and working with a woman and a team that is very female oriented, and also discovering something new for myself after being in this business for such a long time. And I mean, not that you think you know everything, but you discover something, you learn something new, and really seeing how that can expand from this seed of this woman. And I'm really awestruck by her. Cheng Shih was somebody who was way ahead of her time. I mean, she could have easily said, no, women are going to get paid more than men, but she didn't. She was, as you said before, she created this banking system where all the loot would go into one place and then people would be paid out. I think that within the lawlessness of being a pirate, she created these laws, which is pretty incredible, very significant, as we said, ahead of her time. But someone who clearly, even though she didn't have education and wasn't brought up in that kind of environment, she had a common sense and smarts. And I had asked you this before, why this particular female pirate? And you said she was the most powerful of them all. So it's kind of great to be a part of something this special. It's kind of a nice escape to bring something that's historic to VR. Yeah.
Yeah.